This is your life. Behind me, Westminster Bridge, Big Ben, the Houses of Parliament. Ahead of me, cameras of ITN are shooting a famous newsman who's just returned from the USA, where he was covering the visit of Prince Charles. His business is the unexpected. Let's see how he copes when this bobby pops up in his scene.
Martyn Lewis, ITN, London. And again, keep going with it, Martin.
This is P.C. Anderson, Metropolitan Police. Would you mind, sir, accompanying me to the station? Thames TV station, I mean.
Oh,
we would like to hit you with the book. Wind-up? Because tonight,
you are
Martyn Lewis, ITN newscaster and reporter, this is your life.
I don't believe it. Does my wife know about this? Because I'll kill her when I get home.
We'll tell you all that later.
What?
Let's go and make a bit of news now instead of reporting it. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Stuart. Brilliant. I was freezing up there. So was he.
You wait. You wait till we get back. What? I don't believe it.
Oh, do you think I make a convincing policeman?
Very convincing, Eamonn. I mean, quite frankly, I thought that you were the most convincing policeman I've ever seen.
He says the nicest things. Martyn Lewis, this is your life, and ITN's millions of viewers regard you as very much a part of their lives, bringing the world news to their own fireside. But there's someone else who's brought many a news story to viewers of HTV Wales.
Now, it's 7 o'clock on Wednesday night, and that means that it's time for This Is Your Life. And I wonder who Eamonn is all set to surprise this evening. Well, actually, I can tell you. It's my own smashing husband, Martyn. So that means that I'd just better get up and join him.
The HTV Wales announced you married 16 years ago, of course, your wife, Liz. So you heard what he said down there at Westminster?
Did my wife know?
Now, Liz, Martyn had just become a newscaster himself at HTV when you first set eyes on him, right?
That's right. I was up in my continuity booth, and he came in to do a piece for ITN. And I saw this reflection, and I thought, my gosh, there's a rather nice, scrunchy-looking guy. Anyway, he did his piece of work, and I thought to myself, when he leaves, he might ask me whether I can go out. But I thought, well, I'm so busy. I've got a hectic social life. I do very late hours on presentation. There's absolutely no time when I'm going to be free. I'll just say, you know, phone me sometime. And then, as he went out, he said, you must have a very hectic social life, and you've got these very late hours doing continuity. He said, just name any day in the next month when you can come out with me. So I sort of looked rather weakly and said, well, how about phoning me tomorrow?
Well, now, Martyn, since becoming a regular member of the newscasting team 5 years ago, you've also brought out a book of those famous ITN payoff stories called And Finally. Those real-life but loopy yarns that always begin like what?
And finally.
Yes, well, now I want you just to take a look, because at that screen, Martyn, a couple of newcomers to ITN are only just beginning to get in on the And Finally act.
And finally, the story of the 7-year-old girl who skipped school today. And finally, the 11-year-old sister who found out this morning something you didn't know.
Yes, of course, your daughters Sylvie and Katie. Oh, they loved plotting and planning with us. And Martyn, they weren't short of some very professional hints there. Temporarily taking leave from ITN's newsroom, your famous colleagues who nightly bring the news from round the globe. Pam Armstrong. Sandy Gall. Leonard Hawkins. Carol Barnes. Jim Matthias. Editor of ITN, David Nicholas. And finally, if you forgive the use of it, the distinguished doyen of British television news, Sir Alistair Burnett. David, I believe that Martyn has an enviable gift for a reporter, especially when reporting from trouble spots, right?
He can talk himself out of any situation, Eamonn. We got very worried once when he and an ITN crew were arrested in Kabul in Afghanistan, and they got put in an armored personnel carrier, but he found an English-speaking Soviet major who apparently occasionally read the Times. And anyway, he talked himself out of the situation, and we were all relieved. It's the Welsh in him.
Well, Martyn, you joined ITN 15 years ago and had your first ITN action when you were sent to cover the Turkish-Greek Cypriot conflict in Cyprus in 1974.
It's just after 5 o'clock on Wednesday, the 14th of August, and about a dozen Super Sabre jets of the Turkish Air Force have just flown over Nicosia. The jets' targets were the headquarters of the Greek National Guard and other camps around Nicosia Airport. They made 4 runs in all, hitting also a United Nations camp where 5 Finnish soldiers were injured.
But perhaps one of the most eventful assignments was to come just 7 years ago among the all-too-quick-on-the-trigger revolutionaries in Iran, covering the overthrow of the Shah by the fanatical supporters of the Ayatollah Khomeini.
The statues of the Shah and his father, which dominated Tehran's main intersections, were toppled by brute force born of hysteria. Wild crowds then broke off the heads of the statues and shattered them into little pieces, which they proudly displayed. And the statues' remains were dragged through the streets for hundreds of yards, kicked, jumped over, and spat upon.
And Martyn, we've been hearing that under fire, cool and courage are not the only attributes required by a first-rate TV reporter.
Definitely not. You've got to be a bloody good lookout man as well.
He should know because he was your cameraman on those bloodthirsty, avengeful days in Tehran, Charles Morgan. Charles, how do you mean that Martyn had to be a good lookout man for you?
Well, in Iran, the Shah had ordered the troops to shoot at the demonstrators. And obviously, if you're looking through the camera lens, you can't really see where the bullets are coming from. So Martyn used to bundle us out of the way when anything dangerous happened. But the high point, really, was when the Shah left. And he left just as if he'd gone out for a cup of tea, really. And everything was absolutely as it was. And the only thing, there was a slight snag from an ITM point of view, because the radio, if you remember, was tuned into the BBC World Service.
Thank you, Charles Morgan. Well, Martyn Lewis, this is your life, and you were born in Swansea on 7th of April, 1945. Here's your first appearance in front of the camera, already in your best bib and tucker. Your late father, Thomas John Dudley Lewis, was a quantity surveyor by profession and a keen cricketer by choice, though clearly he had determined opposition when you took the crease. You were also a scuba diver. Leviathans of the deep shot for cover when they saw the 7-year-old Martyn John Dudley Lewis, spear in hand, looking like that.
But, Martyn, those sea monsters didn't always escape your dreaded underwater accuracy.
Of course, from her home in Bath, your mother, Joan. There you are, somebody else in on the secret, Martyn. Joan, when that picture we were looking at was taken, your husband's job had taken the family to Fort Rush, County Antrim, and Martyn obviously saw himself as the great sea hunter.
Oh, yes. And on his first venture on this underwater swimming, he came home with 3 flat plates about the size of a fried egg and asked for them for lunch. And would I fillet them? I said no, they were too small to fillet. they'd be best cooked on the bone, but no, they had to be filleted. And I cooked them and served them, but on looking at them for a few seconds, he said, "Oh dear, I wished I'd left them in the harbour," and he couldn't eat them. Anyway, the cat had them.
Well, clearly, Martyn, not enough to share with the young lady we see a picture with here. Of course, your younger sister, who can't be with you tonight because, as you know, she has just returned to America.
I've not been able to come over to be with you on this amazing night. I'm still hoping to lure you over to this part of the world where you haven't exactly been, and to be able, for a change, to take you to some amazing little restaurant just round the corner and initiate you to some wonderful dishes. Because not only in the past have I, from leading roles in the school plays through to leading on the news, but I've always also had this secret admiration for an older brother who so adeptly went from raiding biscuit and cake tins in our mother's larder through to a later, very sophisticated repertoire of wonderful restaurants around the world where you've worked, so that anywhere I've ever gone to travel, you've always had the parting words for me. And while you're there, there's an amazing little restaurant round the corner that you must visit. Anyway, I hope it's a wonderful evening full of surprises, and I send to you and to you and Liz, much, much love from me and from Dan and from the children. Goodbye.
Thank you, Jill Lewis in Amherst, Massachusetts. Well, Martyn, school days are at Dal Riada School, County Antrim. There you are, spreading a nice line in beards in a school production of The Merchant of Venice. From there you go to Trinity College, Dublin, to study geography, economics, and philosophy.
And Martyn, most important of all, you studied stud poker.
Your flatmate at university, now a colonel in the Royal Anglian Regiment, Julian Brown. So, Julian, what sort of poker player was he?
Well, in those days, the game that we had in the rooms was a very big game, and far too big for me. But
And me,
I mean, there were times when there was quite a lot of money going across the table. In fact, I don't think you know this, but your car, that Mini Traveller, was on the table on one or two occasions and went backwards and forwards. In fact, at the end, it always wound up on the right side of the table, but it was touch and go sometimes.
Thank you, Julian Brown. Well, now, even as a student, you had a taste for adventure. During one vacation, you were a fish packer in Iceland. Another, you go to Canada hoping to find work on a ranch. You may well have carried your qualifications with you. Here's 7-year-old cowboy Martyn Lewis. But you also have a special sentimental call to make on that visit to Canada 20 years ago.
And Martyn, I was absolutely overjoyed to see you.
And overjoyed again tonight to recall your happy childhood days together. We've flown her from Edmonton, Alberta, your Welsh cousin, Vivienne. Oh, Vivienne, you two were very close. You were the girl next door, so to speak, who looked after him.
Oh, and it was lovely looking after him for a change when he came to Canada. A big boy then.
Did he get the job on the ranch?
Well, unfortunately, that was the wettest summer on record, and they were just about swimming in mud on the ranch. But I taught him to swim in the sea before that, actually.
And it came in useful, did it?
Oh, it came in very useful.
Although he doesn't look too happy here with you pictured with you. We have a picture of you when you were teaching him all those years ago in Swansea. So what good did it do him in Canada?
Oh, well, he got a wonderful job as a lifeguard at Banff Hot Springs, so he got a marvellous tan when he came to my wedding.
It was a terrific summer. I mean, great.
Thank you, Vivienne Bosley. Now, back at university, you become a key member of the Dublin University Players. The production of Under Milkwood was considered to be at such a high standard, it transferred from the University Theatre to Dublin's famous Gate Theatre. Mind you, it did have a gifted young director, a former student, today a much acclaimed director, both with the National Theatre and the Royal Shakespeare Company, Michael Bogdanov. Well, Michael, you well remember that production of Under Milkwood.
Yes, I do, and I'm not the only one who remembers it. There are loads more who actually remember him as well.
Organ Morgan goes to chapel to play the organ.
Yes, and most of the cast for the first time in 19 years, Martyn, are together again. Best man at your wedding, Douglas Henderson and his wife Heather. Jill Harrow. Redmond Morris. Malachi Lawless. Anthony O'Brien and Stephen Remington. Thank you all, and thank you, Michael. Well, Martyn, leaving university, you got freelance work with the BBC in Belfast, chairing a young people's forum called It Matters to Me, and you decide on a full-time continuing to freelance in Ireland until one day you had a cheeky brainwave. You sat down and wrote probably the most important letter of your life and posted it back home to your birthplace, Wales.
I've had some rum letters in my time, but this one really was a world beater.
Famous BBC war correspondent and the 1968 director of programs at HTV Cardiff, Winfred Vaughan Thomas. Winfred, don't let him talk you out of it. Tell us about that extraordinary world-beating letter.
Well, what happened was we were appointing new announcers. We'd just taken over the franchise for Wales on the West, HTV, and a letter arrived on my desk. What it says, I mean, conceive of somebody applying for a job in following terms. Please see me. I'm your perfect announcer. My grandfather sang as a second tenor in a choir conducted by your father. The cheek of it. However, he came. I saw and he conquered. He was terrific. He looked handsome. The perfect announcer. I appointed him. Even better, I appointed Liz. So I not only appointed him, I married him as well.
Thank you, Winfred Vaughan Thomas. So, Martyn, you started to appear on the screens of HTV, and that meant extra work for someone else.
Having to look smart on television meant I had to wash and iron 2 shirts for you every single day of the week.
She was your landlady for 2 years when you were in digs in Cardiff, Tina Reynolds. Tina, I suppose...
You are better than I do, Tina, I have to say.
She makes the best breakfasts in the world.
But I suppose, Tina, you had to charge him extra for those 2 shirts a day.
No, I didn't.
Did he pay a very heavy rent?
No, 12 and 6, bed and breakfast. That's what all I charged them, wasn't it?
That's
very
$62
expensive
a day.
at the time, I remember.
And the shirts thrown in.
Yes.
Thank you, Tina Reynolds. You stayed at HTV for 2 years, Martyn, and that job changed your life in more ways than one. You were there for 7 years, and Alistair, he certainly impressed you.
Oh, yes, he always has. He's been in most jails in most countries of the world, which is a good sign in a young reporter. And when he was up north, the prisoners in one northern jail had got on the roof for a demonstration. And it was Martyn's ingenuity to interview them through a loudhailer. Only he could have thought of that. I will say one further thing in his thing. He is much younger and much prettier than I am.
But not nearly as experienced.
Well, since then, you've had a fair deal of experience, a whole string of important assignments. The Moscow Olympics in 1980, the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, the attempt on the Pope's life, the royal wedding. But there was one foreign assignment in 1979 that looked as though it might be your last for a long time.
That was the morning in Mersing, Malaysia, when we were suddenly surrounded by armed police and slung in a slammer.
The American freelance cameraman you were with on the tiny seaport of Mersing, southeast Malaysia, 7 years ago. We've flown him from Hong Kong, Marvin Farkas.
exactly the same.
Marvin, what was Martyn up to that day in Mersing?
Well, we were doing this heartbreaking story of the Vietnamese boat people. And Martyn had come upon this story where they had several hundred of these people coming in with their leaking boats. And they were given a little food and then pushed back out to sea, where they have very little chance of survival. There were pirates there and shark-infested waters. It was a terrible thing. So we thought there was a story there. And the police said, stay away from it. Martyn said, nothing doing, we're going back. So we went there, we were hiding behind trees and behind raw rubber bales, and we're shooting away, and all of a sudden, we were surrounded on all sides by local constabulary. They came in, confiscated our cameras, and dragged us off to the pokey. We got there, and we spent about 6 hours worrying about what was going to happen to us. They finally gave us the camera back, they confiscated our film, and they kicked us out of their country. And they said, don't come back again. But I tell you something, I mean, he's the nicest guy I ever had to share a cell with.
Thank you, Marvin Bucket. Well, Martyn, since 1981, you've been a regular ITN newscaster, but you still make the occasional documentary, one of which was seen last summer and which touched the heart of the nation. Your story of the Helen House Hospice for terminally sick children in Oxford. And as a result of that film of yours, donations poured into the hospice funds, and you have the gratitude of many. Not the least of whom is the founder, co-chairman, and fundraiser for the National Help the Hospices charity, the Duchess of Norfolk. In fact, Your Grace, Martyn has helped the whole hospice movement, hasn't he?
Absolutely. When I was trying to get a new national charity off the ground called Help the Hospices, I went to Martyn for help. And you did that fantastic video for us, Martyn. You went on to many, many hospices across the country. And I can't tell you what that did to bring into people's lives what the terminal care movement is doing. And if you remember, you also got that by twisting somebody's arm, I think, on News at 10, as well as the Helen House programme.
David, sitting over there.
David, that's
yes.
right. And that was seen by many, many, many people. You've done a tremendous lot for the movement, and all of us are going to always be grateful.
And the Duchess has as well. I want you to know that, Eamonn. It's a terrific movement.
And another thing, and this is a lovely thing, I think, Martyn, for you to have done, there was a little boy in Helen House who wrote to you and said he would love to come to London and come to ITN. And you brought him to London, and it was the first time, I think, in 11 years that he had visited anywhere but a hospital.
And Martyn, we even arranged for him to have a crack at reading the news. There he is. I can imagine for him it must have been a dream come true.
Yes, but being here tonight is a marvellous dream come true.
Dear, a very good friend from Helen House, 11 years old, Bruce Pike. And Bruce, you have something special to say, haven't you?
And finally, I think you're the greatest.
And finally, it's Martyn Lewis of ITN. This is your life.